Alright guys, such comic again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. More OpTic Scrims going down last night. They played Toronto, their nemesis of course, back at the major. They got 3-0'd, bopped out of the tournament, but Toronto did that to a few other teams as well. And OpTic played the new Gentlemate squad with Johnny and FeLo in their team. Lots of talk about both of these series, especially OpTic's win, becoming the Scrim champions of the second part of the day. But Toronto taking that crown in the early afternoon. Was that to do with ping cheese? Very much to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. Plenty to get into. I know that Nature was talking about the league expansion. It was a big discussion over the last few days about whether we need to go from 12 up to more teams in the league. Nature says, look, at 12 teams right now, let's say you make it 14. Is there enough talent to make the league less top heavy? You know, not necessarily, right? And I think the league will always be top heavy because the new organizations that come in, you know, are they going to be spending the big bucks to be able to get the Simp and aBeZys and the HyDras of this world, stuff like this? Are there enough players to form teams on that level? I wouldn't say necessarily there are. And also the top teams of the league, they also pay for performance coaching, for facilities. In Falcon's case, they're not a top team yet. Maybe they can get there if they keep spending the money. But, you know, they've got private chefs making the meals, stuff like this, that all makes an awful lot of sense. But, so it's almost impossible to imagine that teams would be able to dethrone the top teams. That isn't really the points that I think many of us were making, is that, okay, it's not really about trying to dethrone the top teams, it's about giving more opportunity and more spots for players that could be able to dethrone those top teams with some experience. The point that Temp and X have made is that, look, Envoy, in his early days, was not a top player. Like, he was placing top 48, top 60, top 80 at these tournaments. But it was time in the league and the opportunities that he got that molded him into the player that he is today and the world champion that he is today. If those opportunities aren't there, it becomes more difficult for players like that to really make the progress that we may believe that they could potentially make. However, I do get Nadeshot's perspective. Like, the thing that I agree with about this is that I don't like 14. I don't like 14 as a number. I think it's an ugly number. 12 is like an okay number. And 16 is the pristine, beautiful number, 2 to the power of 4. So 14 is just ugly, in my opinion. I don't like a 14-team league. I don't really know what you do with it to make things pretty. Like, you can't really do groups. At least with 12, you could do 3 groups of 4, 4 groups of 3. You know, 14, what do you do? Like, 2 divisions of 7? Like, yeah, not really happy with that. So, I don't know. Is 14 better than 12? I guess so. Like, if I could snap my fingers and make it a 14-team league, would I do it? Probably I would. But would I, you know, would I do a 16-team league? Absolutely. And I don't hate it at 12 necessarily, but I think we could make it better. Is there the interest in 4 more teams to come in, especially when there are some other organizations out there in the league that might want to get out of the league? So I think there is interest. But the problem is that the teams that are still kind of the poverty teams, you know, Ravens, for example, I know that Boston were considering getting out of the scene last year too. You know, these teams may think, well, we could sell our spot before expansion becomes necessary. I think that's maybe a part of a reality. This is pretty cool. I mean, just to look back in time, really, about... We talk about villains in COD history, the likes of Drazah, maybe nowadays, or even Scrappy, or even like Shotzzy and Envoy going into that role a bit. Simp tried it a couple of years ago. You know, there's been some villains in due course in COD, but aBeZy is still the king of that. I mean, this was certainly a tweet of all time from 2014. It's genuinely bothering me that these events are as easy as they are. We literally didn't scrim once from Champs PAX UGC. I played HaLo, David played Diablo 3, Tyler, that being Tyler Polchow, TP played Final Fantasy and Hearthstone, and Kremp played CSGO. We only played 13 league matches in a month. It's not even funny that we were able to do this. Please step it up for X Games and Anaheim. Sincerely love, Patrick Eagles. The funny thing is that they went on to not win X Games. They won Anaheim though regardless. But still, they don't make villains like this anymore. Let's talk about some of the scrims though that were happening last night, because some notable results here, certainly on OpTic side. They've turned the streams on over the last couple of days. It's been great to see. And they played Toronto and they played Gorillas. Now, Gentlemates, that's pretty much their first series, playing one of their first series as a new team. It's always funny when you see scrims of a team that's not been officially confirmed yet, but they're just scrimming regardless. And of course, OpTic were the scrim champions of yesterday, and, well, not the case as of last night. So the Toronto series is very interesting to me. And this result actually does not surprise me much at all. and it's for a couple of reasons. Toronto, I think, are very good, maybe even somewhat underrated in terms of what they've done. Like, the first part of the season was so strange for Toronto because, like, they seemed to be a really good team, but they would just lose in strange ways and not quite get the results that I think they were good enough to achieve. They're a little bit inconsistent, Toronto. I mean, maybe a little bit is actually a bit of an understatement there. But Toronto, incredibly talented. We saw what they did at the major. 3-0ing OpTic, 3-0ing Thieves. Not an easy thing to do at all. They come into the series, and the first map was pretty close. After that, Toronto took over the series. OpTic did, though, win the Protocol, which again is notable. It was a super tight one, though. 249, 240, or well, 250, 248 in the end after OpTic get this final tick. But also, I've told you guys for a while now, and my understanding is that this is still true to some degree, Toronto are the Scrim champions. These guys are absurd in practice. Like, your teams told me this for a couple of months, and not obviously different teams have different experiences. But if you were basing the predictions for the event on scrims, you would have Toronto in the finals. Like, these guys are disgusting. And I think, we'll see that translated into the matches, and we've started to see that as well. So OpTic have a tough time. And also, just from a matchup perspective, OpTic and Toronto, it's always been a favour towards Toronto. Even, doesn't seem to matter what players they have. Just that Insight CleanX duo has always had OpTic's number, really, since they came into force back in 2021 in Cold War. Of course, they've been an exception to the rule over the years, but generally speaking, I don't think OpTic fans are very happy loading it against Toronto, whatever team they have on the other side. It's always been a pretty good matchup for the Canadian franchise, and again, it seems to be true this year to some degree. Just the pace they bring to the table, the fact that JoeDeceives is getting better and better, and they played 6 maps of the series. The hard points were 1-4, so OpTic won the Protocol, as we saw. They lost the other maps. They lost a really tight vault. Again, they lost a really tight vault to FaZe the day prior. The HyDra was 250-177, the Skyline 250-190, and it wasn't like these were crushing defeats, but watching the scrims then, it definitely felt like Toronto were in command of the series. They lost the HyDra at 3-2, eventually the defense went to Toronto and they got the win, and then they chalked up the final 2 controls. Now, this was notable because of the situation with the ping. So they played on an Iowa server, which meant that OpTic and Skyz was talking about this a bit as well. We're not very happy with the situation with the ping, suggesting that, well, we're on ping disadvantage here, so maybe we'll just chalk up the final couple of controls. We're not really playing in a fair environment. So, Toronto are playing on 20 ping, OpTic were playing on 37 ping or so, and there was some discussion in the replies. So people were like, why they're scrimming on an Iowa server, what's going on there? And Beans actually hits the replies and says, we could play the St. Louis server in, I think that's Missouri, right? And we ping 20 and they ping 24, but they don't want to play on that server, and the Atlanta server is broken for us. They asked for Iowa, not us. So, Beans says, it's not our fault we're playing on this slight ping advantage. And look, a 16, 17 ping advantage, it's significant enough, it's measurable as a difference. Is it enough of a difference to swing a series in this way? In my opinion, probably not, but I'm not a pro player. I mean, if you blink your eyes right now, you could fit probably 10 of those 16 ping windows into that blink. So it's going to affect some gunfights in a series. Is it going to affect enough gunfights to justify? It's always a debate, isn't it? The pros are going to say that it matters more than the fans will, and look, who's right, who's wrong, who really knows? But the point is that it was at least a reasonably competitive. Beans was hitting the replies. I mean, it is interesting, we'll bring up Google Maps, because why not, right? So obviously here's Toronto, where the Toronto boys are based, and OpTic are based down here in Dallas. So you'd think, okay, maybe an Atlanta server makes a bit of sense. That's a common one that works, but apparently that doesn't really work for Toronto. So instead they've got an Iowa server that they can run with, or they can have the St. Louis server in Missouri, right? And it's just on the border, isn't it? Yeah. So, yeah, that's an option. That, I mean, the St. Louis server actually makes a better sense, doesn't it, in terms of being in between, but apparently OpTic don't want to play on that one, so they play the Iowa server, which is slightly closer to Toronto. Who knows? Who really cares? I don't know if OpTic are going to be scrimming them massively again, though, if they believe that the internet situation is a little bit compromised. They did play one more series, though, and this was certainly a notable one against the new Gentlemates team. So FeLo is in, of course, Priester is gone, and Lunarz is to stay, with Kismet over there too. Linz is gone. on, and it's Johnny into the team instead. And this is a pretty nice result here from OpTic, right? Now, on the other side of the team, technically, they had Lunarz, Kismet, Linz, and Drazah, I think, because, you know, understandably, they wanted to play on the accounts of the players who are still there. Drill, of course, coach of the team, so presumably we had Johnny and we had, obviously, FeLo playing on these accounts of the players that were currently there because, you know, Java wasn't loading up to the server, let's be honest here. So, you know, I think that was the game that they were playing there. So they've not officially confirmed the roster yet. Okay, whatever, fair enough. But it was a pretty good scrim set from OpTic. They lost the first map, the Hacienda 250-196, but after that, they pretty much just slammed them everywhere. The hardpoints were bad, and maybe this should be expected, right? Gentlemates, they've got to try and put some things together. OpTic are looking pretty well-oiled lately. I mean, look, they beat FaZe 7-1 the other day. That's no mean feat at all. So to win all those maps by, you know, 100+ points, sometimes it got really bad, such as on the Vault. And then the Vault Control, the Hassi Control, also dominant victories. Both playing on the Dallas service, there was basically no ping at all that these teams had to worry about. And, you know, a hot 6-2 against LAG. They lost the Protocol Control, somewhat notable because, you know, it's just interesting to see where OpTic will go with their control vetoes. Protocol was the map that they never really liked. Maybe they're going to stick with that as their auto veto if they're confident enough on the other ones. There was this clip here from Methods just talking about FeLo and Johnny on, you know, obviously these guys doing well in challenges, but translating that is always a bit of a question mark. And, well, Zinni doesn't really believe that it was working out in their favor.
Who's on this LAG team? Kismet, FeLo, Lunarz, and Johnny. Do you really think Johnny was a good pickup?
They can't cut mid.
Listen, man.
Can't go right.
All we know is this. Johnny and FeLo were unreal in challengers. Will it translate?
That's what he was doing there.
We'll find out. Right now it's not in this scrim, but time will tell.
Just before we close out the video then, thought you guys might find this kind of interesting to have a look at the matches that OpTic are set to play. Some teams have it easier, some teams have a harder run. This is OpTic's run through the rest of the season in the qualifiers. Only 5 qualifiers in the upcoming stages. They play Kenny's Rocker on Friday, buzzing for that. They play Cloud9 on the Saturday, not an easy game. Heretics are a team that always seem to cause OpTic problems, despite the fact that on paper, they should be able to handle business there. And then it's Vegas, right? Preds Vegas, who you'd expect to be better, but maybe not spectacular. And then FaZe. So not an easy run, really. And the next stage is Surge, Boston, Ravens, Gentlemates, Toronto. So probably more doable. But yeah, intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below on how you think OpTic are going to fare. Like, as it stands, I think they're going to have no difficulties getting to the winners bracket and, you know, potentially making a run. Whether they can win with this current team, that is still a matter for debate. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.
Thoughts on Envoy comments on the CDL expansion and challengers? I don't know. I think everybody's kind of blown that out of proportion. It's like Envoy is like one of the nicer kids I've seen come out of the pro scene in the last like 5, 6, 7 years. And I don't know if I necessarily disagree with just the idea of expansion teams. I know they haven't won an event this year, so I'm not trying to put words in their mouth, but do I think there's a lot of talent in challengers that just needs the right opportunity? There's always going to be. I think without a doubt, there's always going to be. And I'm not probably the best like scout or judgment of talent, and I definitely don't keep up with the challenger scene. So that one's a little out of my neck of the woods of what I should probably be speaking on. But I definitely see where Dylan is coming from, saying that, say they added another 2 teams to the league. And the biggest complaint thus far is from at least a sentiment that I've seen consistently in the CDL. This is a pretty top-heavy league. And I don't think it's as top-heavy as people thought it was going to be at the beginning of the year, because Surge picks up Neptune. They look like a top 4 team, top 3 team. Toronto Ultras also looked really, really good. OpTic should be better than they are. Then you have FaZe and LA Thieves. That's like 5 teams right there. But how many teams are in the league right now? 12? What is it? 10, 12? How many teams are in the league? There's 12 teams in the league. All right. Say you added 2 more to get us to 14. I don't know if there is enough talent to make the league less top heavy, if that makes sense. Dude, don't get me wrong, bro. I'm sure there's like, without knowing the challenger scene, I'm sure there's like 5 to 10 players that could be swapped out with somebody on a CDL team now and play decently well. But I don't think expansion or having more teams right now. I don't think having more teams right now is the best course of action. And I haven't put a lot of thought in this, so somebody could sway my opinion. I just think the format is the problem, bro.